Hi guys, and welcome to another video. In this video we're going to be installing both Mac OS Mojave and High Sierra as KVM virtual machines on Unraid. We're going to be passing through a bunch of hardware, getting everything working as best as it can be. Oh, and also as easily as possible as well. Sounds good? Well, let's get started. Well guys, so it's the time of year when good old Apple release their new flavour of Mac OS. And this year, it's desert flavoured. No, I didn't say dessert, but I said desert, because now we have Mac OS Mojave. There are some nice new features in this OS, such as dark mode, dynamic desktop, stacks, and some new privacy and security features, which also sound good. But this isn't a video about Mojave's new features, and if it's good or bad, etc. This is a video about how to install it on Unraid as a KVM virtual machine. But this video is actually going to be a dual video, because I'm also going to show how to install the most up-to-date High Sierra as well. And the reason for this is because a lot of us are using Nvidia GPUs in our servers. And at present, October 2018, there are no Nvidia Mojave drivers available. So if you want to pass through that Nvidia graphics card to your Mojave VM, there are no drivers to get it working properly. We're going to have to wait a while. Now personally I think, but I don't know for sure, that we're going to have to wait at least a few months before we see the Mojave Nvidia drivers. And the reason I think that is because OpenGL and OpenCL are depreciated in Mojave. They're still supported by the operating system, but they're no longer going to be maintained. And Apple is saying developers are encouraged to use Apple's Metal library instead. So the Nvidia webdrivers are going to need a total rewrite. So I think we're going to have to be more patient than we perhaps want to be. However, some graphics cards will work fine. If you've got something like an AMD RX 580, well that should work fine. And there's also been reports of basic graphics cards like the Nvidia GT 710 working fine as well. And of course there's nothing to stop you installing the OS without passing through a graphics card, just using the VNC graphics. So in this video we're going to be looking at the most up-to-date methods of installing Mac OS as a KVM virtual machine and how to pass through the GPU and a USB controller to the VM. So the first thing that we're going to need is the install media for either High Sierra or Mojave. And for that we need to download it using a Mac from the Apple App Store. So I'm going to go across to my existing KVM Hackintosh to do that. Now I know some of you watching this, you won't have a Mac to download the install media from, and you'll be wondering what to do. Well hopefully, if you don't have a Mac to download the install media, you may have a friend who does, and hopefully they can help you out. Now failing that, you'll need to find an image for it online somewhere. You know the normal places to look, I'm sure. Unfortunately, I can't point you to any links or sites where you can download Mac OS. You know, I just can't risk being haunted by Steve Jobs' ghost for posting links to things Apple would rather us not have online. Anyway, so once you've jumped on a Mac, just open up the Apple App Store and do a search for Mojave. Then once there, just click on the download button to download it to your computer. Then once it's downloaded, a window will pop up prompting us to install it. Well, we want to close that window, and then we'll find the install media inside our applications folder. And we'll use this in a moment to create the image file that we're going to use to install it on the Unraid server. But before we do that, let's think about if we wanted to download Mac OS High Sierra. You can see here that the search in the App Store returns no results, and that's because the App Store will only ever have the latest version of Mac OS available to download. So what do we do? Well, if you've already downloaded High Sierra in the past, if you click onto Purchased and then log into the Apple ID that you used to download it originally, you should find it there to be able to download. But if you haven't got it here, then we're going to have to do something different. In the description of this video, you'll see a file linked that's called Download Mac OS Tools. Download that to the desktop and unzip the file. Then open up the folder where you'll find two files inside. One called Mac OS High Sierra Patcher and the other one Mac OS Mojave Patcher. Now normally these programs are used to patch Mac OS to enable it to run on older Apple hardware than is officially supported, but we can also use it to download Mac OS directly from the Apple servers. So let's run this one here, the High Sierra Patcher. So just go through and follow the various prompts, and then when it's open I'm just going to clear these out of the way so we can get a better look. And you can see here we've got the message natively supported machine. Well, that's because I don't need to actually patch the operating system, I only want to download it. So on the top bar just click onto Tools and then download macOS High Sierra, and the message here is just telling us it's coming straight from the Apple servers. So click yes to proceed, and then we need to select the download location, and I'm selecting my desktop, and then we just sit back and wait for it to download. So let's speed this bit up a bit. So once it's finished downloading, you'll be presented with this window here asking if you want to create a patched USB drive. Well, we don't want to do that, so click on Not Now and close the program. So what I'm going to do now is move the installer into the Applications folder. So now you can see here I've got the Install macOS High Sierra and the Install macOS Mojave. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is to put these install files onto an image file we can actually use on Unraid. So now you want to go to the description in the video and download the file OS X support files. Then once you've grabbed that file, unzip it onto the desktop because we'll be needing that in a moment. But before that, we need to open up Disk Utility so we can create a blank image file in order to make the installer go onto. So click onto File, then New Image, and then Blank Image. And then where it says Save As, we need to give it a name. Give it the same name as the OS that you're going to install, so I'm going to call mine Mojave. Then also here, just give it the same name. And for the size of the image file, just choose 8 gigs. Then leave everything else as default as you can see here, and click onto Save. And that will create the blank image file that we need, and then just click onto Done. So now we can close Disk Utility and then go back to the OS X support files folder here, open it, and inside we'll see this folder here, the Install Creator. Let's open that and run Install Disk Creator. And I'm just going to close this window here to clean up the screen a bit. And here at the top, this is where we choose where we want to write the image to. So I'm going to choose the blank image that I made earlier, the one I named Mojave. And then underneath here, we can choose which image we actually want to create the image from. So I'm going to click onto my Applications folder. And at the top here, we can see both High Sierra and Mojave. And I'm going to choose Mojave to install. So to write Mojave onto that image on the desktop, we just need to click Create Installer and then Erase Disk. And then pop in the password and just wait for it to be written. Okay, so that's done. Let's click on OK and let's quit the disk creator. And we can see now that the installer has been written inside this disk image, so that's good. So now let's eject the disk image, and we're going to need to rename this file here from the file extension .dmg to the file extension .img. So we've got our install media now for Mojave, but I also created an install media for High Sierra as well. Now the install method is the same for both High Sierra and Mojave, except for one small difference. For Mojave to work, it must have some CPU features present in the host CPU, which is passed through to the Mojave VM in order for it to work correctly. And those features are SSE3, SSE 4.2 and PopCNT. This is because when we make our Mac OS VM, we must use an emulated Penryn CPU. But this CPU, a Penryn, doesn't have all the functions that Mojave needs, so we need to add them and pass them through as additional features in the XML. Now, most newer CPUs will have these features, but if you're not sure your CPU has these, then this is easy to check with a simple command. Let's go to the Unraid web UI and click onto Terminal. And if we paste in this command, we can see here all of the flags that our CPU has. But to check just for the 3 flags that we're interested in for Mojave, we can run this command here. And we can see here that those 3 features are supported. And the reason we can see it lots and lots of times is because it will do it for each core on the CPU. Okay, so long as we have those 3 CPU flags, then we can install Mojave on our Unraid server. However, if we don't have those flags, then we can still install High Sierra. Now again, as I said before with Mojave, if you want to pass through an Nvidia GPU, then as of when this video was made, we don't, or didn't, have Nvidia webdrivers released at the time. So Nvidia graphics cards don't work well in Mojave until we have the correct drivers, although I will show you a workaround. However, Nvidia cards, except for the new RTX cards, work perfectly in High Sierra. So to check if the web drivers are available, then go to this URL here. And you can see at the moment the latest web drivers are for High Sierra 10.13.6. So nothing yet for Mojave. So once you've chosen whether you're going to install Mojave or High Sierra onto your Unraid server, we're going to have to move the install image across onto the server. But there's also another file that we're going to have to move across as well. So if we open up the OS X support files here, we can see in here there's a Clover image file. So I'm just going to put that onto the desktop. Now for those of you who have watched my earlier macOS install videos, we always used to install Clover into the actual install media itself. But it's much better to keep the Clover image separate and boot from that and then run the installer from this Clover image here. And also we can all be sure that we're running the same Clover image when we're making this install. And the Clover version in this VDisk is 2.4K revision 4674 from September the 19th 2018. Now before we move these files across to the server, let's go and create the VM template first. So on the Unraid web UI, let's click onto VMs, scroll down to the bottom of the page and add a VM. And we're going to base it off a Linux template here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the icon here to an Apple logo. Now if you don't have these extra icons on your Unraid server, well I made a video a few years ago about how to do that, and you can see that here. And of course we're going to change the name. I'm going to change it to Mojave. And now we need to add some virtual CPUs. I've added 4 cores here, and I'm also going to add 8 gigs of RAM. For machine type you want Q35, and I'm using 3.0 because that's the highest version currently available in Unraid 6.6.3. So now let's scroll down, and now we're going to add our VDisks. Now we're going to add 3 VDisks. The first one 1 gig, and then we're going to add a second one, and the second one's also going to be 1 gig. Now we're choosing really small VDisks because we're going to delete these later on. But the third VDisk we're going to keep because this is going to be the VDisk we'll install the VM onto. So I'm going to make this one 50 gigs. Now a very important thing to do is to change the primary VDisk bus to SATA because macOS doesn't recognise VirtIO. So that's all we need to do for now, so let's scroll to the bottom and uncheck Start VM after creation and click on to create. And now let's minimise the Unraid web UI and then browse to our Unraid server, then open the share where you store your VMs. And for me I've got a custom one here called VM's NVMe. And in here we can see here's the VM template that we just created here, Mojave, and there's the 3 VDisks. So I'm going to delete the first 2 now, VDisk 1 and VDisk 2. And I'm going to copy my Clover image in here and also the install image of Mojave. Now one thing to notice while we're here, the Clover image is a QCal2 image and the others are just .img raw images. So let's go back to the Unraid web UI and we're going to go back to the VM template and go to Edit. And because we just deleted these 2 VDisks, it now says the primary VDisk location is manual. So now we can choose our own location. So as the Clover image is a QCal2, I need to change that to QCal2. So now I'm going to browse now to where I copied the Clover image and select that for the primary one. Now our secondary VDisk, I'm going to browse to the same location and choose the Mojave install media. Okay, so now we've got our 3 VDisks here, so now we can scroll to the bottom of the page and click update. So now we need to add some custom XML to the VM template. On XML view, scroll to the bottom and highlight domain. Now minimise the Unraid web UI and go back to the OS X support files on the desktop. And with the text editor, open the file OS X VMs XML. This text file has various pieces of useful information in it, as well as 4 snippets of XML, 2 for High Sierra and 2 for Mojave. Each bit of XML has various different flags passed through, and which one to use depends on the capabilities of your host CPU. And I'm going to use the second one here for Mojave, which has all of the CPU flags passed through. Now we need to paste it over the bottom domain tag on the XML. Now I have left the Apple OSK key in the XML, And the reason for that, because it's in a United States District Court document, which you can see in that link there, and also it's widely available on the internet. And in this court case, Apple tried to have these documents sealed because it contained the OSK key, and they failed having that done and lost the case. So because the OSK key is in a court document and widely available on the internet, I decided I'd include it in the XML I provide here. But if you happen to go on the Unraid forums and post your XML whilst asking questions, then please block out the OSK key because it's against the forum rules. Now there's one other piece of XML we have to change, and that's a network adapter type, and I'm changing mine here to VMXNet3. If you scroll to the bottom of the XML file, you'll see the two different network types that we can use. I'm using VMXNet3 because it has the best performance, but if you want one that has better compatibility with things such as the App Store, then use the Intel E1000. Okay, with that done, so let's click on to update and start up the VM, and let's start the install. Okay, so when we get to this screen here, we need to go across until it says restart computer, and then hit enter and keep pressing the escape key until you see this screen here. Now we have to change the resolution in the actual BIOS of the OVMF, so for that we go to Device Manager and then OVMF Platform Configuration, and here we can change the resolution to 1920 by 1080, and that's the resolution that's set in Clover, so it needs to match, else we won't get a proper display. So now commit changes and exit again, and then go down to continue, and now we're actually going to close this window here, and I'm going to force stop the VM. If we don't do this, then those changes we made don't stick. So click on to start, and back into the VNC window, then you'll go into the Clover bootloader, just press enter and you should see the Apple symbol and it's starting to load. Then you'll come to the language selection screen, choose your language and then go to disk utility. At the top here under view, click the downwards arrow and then go to show all devices. Then select your virtual hard drive, it'll be the largest one, mine's 50 gigs here. And then you can format it either as APFS or you can use Mac OS Extended Journaled. Click Erase and that will format the virtual hard drive. So after that, click done, and then we can close disk utility here and then click on install Mac OS. Agree to the license terms and then choose the hard drive we just formatted and click install. Then Mac OS will start installing onto the hard drive. You'll find it will reboot and then carry on the install. And then once it's finished, you'll get to the welcome screen where you'll choose your language and go through the options such as creating an account, etc. and setting up the time zone. All of this setup is pretty much exactly the same on both High Sierra and Mojave. You'll come to the screen where you have to choose your keyboard, and then the first thing to do is just check the internet works because that's important. If it doesn't work, it's probably because you didn't change the VirtIO driver to the correct type. So internet's working here both on Mojave and on High Sierra. And for the next part of the video, let's go across onto the High Sierra VM. Now remember, the install process is the same for High Sierra and Mojave, but I just want to do this bit on High Sierra, which as you can see here is version 10.13.6. macOS thinks this is an iMac late 2013 with an unknown processor, 8 gigs of RAM and a 7 megabyte display adapter. Right, so as we know the internet's working, we're going to need to download these macOS support files again from the description in the video. Unzip the file, then open the folder, in which you'll see the Clover configurator. Just drop that into your applications folder, then go into applications and run the file. And a little tip, if you hold down the shift key and right click and then click open, you can run the file without the warnings about it being from an unidentified developer, bringing you straight into the program. So click onto Mount EFI, as now we want to open the partition on the actual VDisk we've installed macOS onto. That VDisk will have 3 partitions and it's going to be the largest VDisk that you've got. Mine here is 50 gigs. If we scroll down we can see the other disks here. Here's the actual Clover image on its own, and this one here is the install image. So we can see here that it's disk 0 for me. That might be different for you. So I need to open disk 0 S1 partition. You're going to need to pop in your password, click OK, and then click on to open partition. And you'll find a folder there called EFI. We're going to want to delete that, and then also we're just going to empty the trash to fully get rid of it. So just to minimise the clutter on the screen, I'm going to minimise Clover configurator, then open up the OS X support files folder, and in there you'll find a folder called Clover with an EFI folder in. Just drag and drop that into the new EFI partition. So what we've done here now is to replace the EFI folder in the VDisk where we've installed macOS onto with an EFI folder that contains Clover, various kex and other things we need to run macOS as a KVM virtual machine. So with that done, we can close all of the files now and shut down our VM. So with the VM shut down, let's edit the VM template. And we want to make sure that the template's set to XML view and not to form view. Then we need to scroll right to the bottom of the page of the XML, and then we want to copy between the domain tag at the bottom and the QEMU command line here. And click copy. And the reason we're copying this XML is because we're going to make an edit in the moment in the actual template manager. So we're going to need to paste this XML back in a moment because any custom edits are lost when we use the template manager. And the only other custom edit we've actually made is actually changing the network adapter from VirtIO to either VMX 3 or an Intel Virtual E1000 adapter. So we'll have to put that back as well in a moment. But for now, let's go back over onto the form view, scrolling down to the VDisk section. And so now we can remove the install media and the Clover image. Now remember, the Clover image is a QCOW2 image, so we can't just go here and swap it for the VDisk. We need to actually remove this fully. So click that onto none and remove these other two VDisks as well. And then scroll down and click update, and that removes all of the disks. So then go back to edit again, scroll back down, and now change the primary VDisk location from none to manual. And let's browse back to where we keep our VDisks. And here we can see the QCOW2 image, the install media, and there's my VDisk with macOS installed on it. Again, make sure the primary VDisk is set to SATA, and now we can scroll down and click update. Let's go straight back to the template and click edit, and then switch back across to XML view and scroll down to the bottom and highlight domain at the bottom, and let's paste that XML back in that we copied earlier. And scroll up till we come to our network adapter. Then we need to put back in our network adapter, and for me that was VMX 3, and click update. So now we can start up the VM, open VNC, and now we're booting from Clover directly from the VDisk where macOS is installed. And now we're back up onto the desktop. So next we want to go back to our applications folder and start up Clover Configurator again. And again we need to click on Mount EFI because we need to open the EFI partition on this disk, and click Open Partition. And if you go into the EFI folder, then into the Clover folder, and right click config.plist and open it with Clover Configurator. And then once here, if you click on SMBIOS, and we can see here the product model is iMac 14.2, and that's the iMac from late 2013 we saw on the About This Mac earlier. The 14.2 is very compatible when you pass through a graphics card, so it's good for all systems. But personally, I prefer using a bit of a newer iMac definition, the 18.3 here. And if you experiment with using other system definitions, just please be aware that some don't work properly at all, especially if you've got a graphics card passed through. But no matter which system definition you choose, there's one thing that you want to do, is click on Generate New here for the serial number and also the UUID. So once you've generated a new serial number, we need to check that serial number, and to do that you just want to click on here where it says Check Coverage. And that will bring you to your check service and coverage page on the Apple website, and you'll see that the serial number is already entered in, so we just need to enter the cipher code here and click Continue. Now if you see a page like this saying you've got a valid serial number, and it says please validate your product's purchase date or something like that, well, this isn't actually a good thing because we don't want a valid serial number, and that's because that means that serial number is already in use somewhere already. So if we go into, like, say the Apple App Store or something, we're going to have an identical serial number to a real Apple Mac. So if we've got that, we don't want it, so we're going to have to generate a new serial number. So I'm going to click on here, check another serial number, and then go back across to the Clover Configurator and generate a new one. I'm going to copy this and then go back to the Apple website to check it, paste it in here and see what comes up for this one. And this is exactly what you want to see. It says, sorry, but the serial number isn't valid. Please check your information and try again. Well, that's actually exactly what we want because it just means that this serial number hasn't ever been registered with Apple, so it's good for us to use it. So we can close the check coverage page now, and we can also close Clover Configurator. And what we've done there will come into effect after we reboot the VM. But what we're going to do now is install some remote desktop software so we can access the VM. And to make things easier, I've actually included the Splashtop streamer in this folder here called Other. So install that onto your VM. It's much better quality than using VNC, and also we need to have some remote desktop software installed if we want to pass through a graphics card. And that's because we use it in order to install the drivers, well, the web drivers if you're using an Nvidia card, in order to make it work. And we'll be coming to that in a moment. You can see here that I'm logged into my Splashtop account with Splashtop Streamer, so if you don't have a Splashtop account you will have to register one. It is free, but if you really don't want to use Splashtop, another really good piece of software is a piece of software called Gnome Machine. But for most people I think Splashtop's much easier to use. Now if you're installing Splashtop on Mojave, then you're going to have to open the system preferences to grant access to Splashtop in the security and privacy preferences. And once you've done that, Splashtop Desktop will run fine. But this isn't something you have to do in High Sierra, this is just new that we have to do in Mojave. So once you've installed your remote desktop software, minimise the VNC window. Of course you'll need Splashtop installed on the client computer as well. There's versions for both Windows and for Mac OS. Anyway, so when you're ready just click on to connect and that will bring you to the desktop of your Mac OS VM. Now as I said earlier, Splashtop or some remote desktop software is really useful to be able to pass through a graphics card to a Mac OS VM. So let's shut down the VM and pass through some hardware. So with the VM shut down, let's go straight to the template and click edit. And just as before, we want to be in XML mode and scroll down to the bottom and copy everything between domain and QEMU command line. Then scroll back up to the top of the page and switch across to form view. So adding the hardware is just the same as you would for any VM. I'm just going to select the graphics card. I'm going to select this GTX 750 Ti here. I'm not going to need to pass through a ROM for this graphics card as it's not my primary card, but if you did need to pass through a ROM file then you will select it here. For sound card, obviously I'm going to pass through the corresponding sound counterpart of the graphics card here, but also I want to pass through my onboard sound as well, so I'm going to select my AMD HD audio controller here. And at the bottom here I've got two USB controllers that I can pass through. Now normally to an OS X VM I like to pass through the Fresco Logic controller, because that's natively supported in OS X, but you can also try passing through any USB controller you like, because I've included various KECs for USB controllers and audio controllers in the actual Clover that comes with this video, so most hardware you have hopefully should work. So once you've selected the hardware you're going to use, just click onto update, then go back to the VM template and click edit again, switch across to XML mode, scroll down to the bottom of the page, select domain and then paste back in that XML that we copied earlier. Now don't forget to change your network adapter back to the type it was before. I'm going to change mine back to VMXNet3. So with our custom XML back in, let's just click on update and start up the VM. And if you've passed through an Nvidia graphics card like I have, you'll see that the graphics is all a bit messed up with the kind of login screen looking like it's there 3 times. Well, that's why we installed Splashtop earlier, because we need to access it now via a remote desktop. So let's log into the desktop of the VM. You can see here that the resolution is pretty small. That's because our drivers aren't installed yet. So the first thing we need to do is go back to Clover Configurator, mount the EFI partition, and then open it. Then browse to your config.plist file and open that in Clover Configurator. Go to the section called boot, then put a check next to NVDA_DRV equals 1. Then head down to the section system parameters and you're going to need to pull it across to the right and then just put a check next to NVIDIA Web. Then close Clover Configurator, saving the changes. Now let's close all of these windows and then we're going to open up Terminal. Then we're going to go back to our OS X support files here and we're going to go into the folder called Other, where you'll see a text file called NVIDIA GPUs README. Open up that, then copy this text here. This will download and run a script by Benjamin Dobell, which is really awesome. Then paste it into Terminal and sit back and wait, whilst the script downloads the correct web drivers for your version of Mac OS. And the really great thing about this script as well is if there aren't actually web drivers available for the version of Mac OS you're using, it will actually patch the file so it'll install onto the system. Now the script has patched the drivers for Mojave because at present when I'm making this video there aren't web drivers available from Nvidia. but when there are WebDrivers available for Mojave, it won't patch them, it will just download the latest version that are available for the system. Anyway, so with the WebDrivers installed, let's reboot both the systems and see what's happened. So the graphics card's working fine, and under the audio devices we can see my onboard audio, and we can see the HDMI audio from the graphics card as well. So as always, when I test these things, I'll quickly go onto YouTube and see how it plays video. And I can easily switch audio devices, and that's working fine. I've actually muted the video from YouTube just in case YouTube think I'm playing something that's copyrighted. I've just tested the USB and that's working absolutely fine as well, so that's all good. And in the system information we can see the GTX 750 Ti is listed there, and we can see the new system definition I put in earlier. It now thinks I've got an iMac 2017. Okay, so everything in High Sierra is working fine, so now let's switch across to Mojave and see how it's going there. So across on Mojave, I'm straight into playing a YouTube video, and under the sound output devices we can see all the sound devices present here, the onboard sound and the HDMI sound from the graphics card, so that's all good. However, there's one thing to notice with Mojave, because at present there are no Nvidia WebDrivers, well, not official ones anyway, so because of that the graphics card hasn't got any acceleration. So we really are waiting for Nvidia to release the WebDrivers, so come on Nvidia, help us Hackintosh guys out. Okay, so that's everything done now, so that brings us to the end of the video. Well guys, I really hope that you found this video useful. And if you did like the video, then please hit that like button and share it with anyone who you think will find it useful. And I just want to give a huge thanks to all of my Patreon supporters out there. It's thanks to you guys that make it all possible for me to make these videos. Well guys, it's time for me to go now. Good luck with building your virtual Hackintoshes, and whatever you're up to for the rest of the day, I hope it's good, and I'll catch you in the next video.